It's unlikely that you listen to this podcast and are somehow unaware of this, but just in case, I want to let you know right now until October 19th, noon EST, there is a crowdfund for a book that I am publishing called Double-Edged Sword and Sorcery. It's called that because it's 2 novellas bound in one book, written by classic New Edge Sword and Sorcery authors Dariel Quiogue and Bryn Hammond, which, if you're familiar with their work, you'll know that that is like a fun pairing of 2 people with their own very distinct voices tackling Mongolian-inspired sword and sorcery. Great stuff. Please go to BackerKit. You can follow the link in the description here, or you can just go to BackerKit and search Double-Edged Sword and Sorcery. I promise we're the only one. Anyway, what follows is the audio from a live stream interview with Dariel that we did quite recently. Not much to explain there, so I think we'll just move on quickly toward it. So, yep, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope, if you haven't already, you consider pledging for the book, which would be just huge if we get to make this sucker. It would really kick off a lot of exciting things for next year as well. And tell your friends, tell your frenemies, tell your lovers to enemies. All right. Have you had breakfast, Dariel? Are you feeling good on that front? Great, great. We'll give it like another 2 minutes or so. But how are you feeling, Dariel? Like just in general, because I know the you obviously you've been a part of like every Nest crowdfund, but there it's kind of the pressure is kind of diffused across like 40 people, 45 people, whatever. This time it's really like your name is kind of front and center beside Bryn's in lights. How's it felt today? I guess you got to sleep during a lot of it because you're in the Philippines. But for me, the first day of the crowdfund is always like really kind of a wild energy. How's it felt for you seeing it and then going to bed and waking up to it again?
Well, yeah, it was kind of difficult to sleep last night when I was looking at the crowdfund and like, whoa, these numbers are really going up.
Yeah,
so that temptation to stay on and watch that number growing. That was fun.
Oh, for sure. When we did the first magazine crowdfund, it was really funny, actually. Like, I got pretty addicted, as you can imagine. But my partner, sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night to go to the washroom, and I see her on her phone checking the numbers. She got more addicted than me.
Yeah, I had to force myself to sleep last night.
Well, I hope you got some rest.
I did.
Oh, hey,
and if I didn't, coffee solves everything.
Exactly. Like, we'll get through this. This hard-hitting interview where I will expose you for your many crimes. Introduce you to the public. We could round. Hey, Mike, Philip, James. Good. All right, Elizabeth, Teflon 12. I've seen you around. Awesome. A lot of good folk from the Discord and beyond, of course. King Everyday. Oh, hey, Kevin. All right, good to see you, man. Once again, you get to enjoy a Nest live stream without having to produce it. Which actually reminds me, I should mention up front. Big thanks. You can't see them currently. They're kind of off camera. But Lee, our social media coordinator, is running the live stream tonight. And without him, I would be trying to do too many things at once for sure, on top of everything else. I'm sure I'm like kind of the face of Brackenbury Books, but I could not do what I'm doing without obviously the authors and artists, but perhaps a little less obviously. People like Lee doing social media, Nathaniel Webb doing our layout and design, Valerie Valdez is our proofreader, copywriter, pardon me. And the whole host of other wonderful people who are supporting us in less obvious ways. And thank you to all of you for who've pledged so far and shared the good word. Really appreciate it. This is our final crowdfund of the year for what will, fingers crossed, I'm feeling good about it though, will be the second book of Brackenbury Books. Although in a way it's kind of 2 books, right? Because we're doing, I don't mind saying it in a live stream. I can't use it in advertising, but kind of an ace double situation. For those of you who don't know what I mean when I say that, it's kind of a classic format from the 60s and 70s that the company Ace did, where they would take 2 novellas or they called them short novels, but my God, they were really short, and they would just kind of like bind them together in one book. I've got an example here, actually. You got one cover on one side. Then, you flip it over and you get another one, right? And of course, the text is upside down on the other side, along with an old cigarette ad or whatever. Yeah, you get the idea. You know what upside down is, but I just like showing things. So yeah, I mean, this functionally in form is what we're doing with our two authors, of course, one of whom is Bryn Hammond, that you'll get to know a little better further down the crowdfund. And we have teamed her up with Dariel R.A. Quiogue, who let's launch into it, man. It's been a few minutes. We got a nice little audience here. I think we can dive into the interview. And folks, feel free to throw questions in the chat. When Dariel and I reach kind of a logical sort of ending point for the interview, we will then turn this into a question and answer. Lee will kindly work through your questions, toss them up on the screen, and we'll do our best to give the answer. You can address them to both of us or one of us or whatever. By one of us, I mean Dariel. I mean, come on. I'm always here. So yeah. All right. Dariel,
All right.
this is really,
good
really
evening,
cool.
everyone.
Yeah. This is so fun to be doing this because, folks, maybe you don't know this part, but Dariel, you know that like late 2021, Hoy of the Appendix and Book Club podcast was chatting with me, and he said, "Hey, man, you should really check out this author, Dariel Quiogue. You know, he does this character, Orhan the Snow Leopard, and some other guys. He's really good." So I was like, "Okay," I went out and like I got what I could get my hands on in late 2021. Pretty soon in February 2022, I was interviewing Dariel for my podcast. So I'm writing a novel. And that was the first time we really got to have a chat and get to know each other. And I still remember how my cat at the time, bless him, barfed right beside my feet as we were doing the interview. And we'd had so many technical issues along the way that I was like, I can't stop this. So I just sat there having a great conversation, but like while like a pool of warmth beside my foot cooled gradually. It was quite exciting. Anyway, luckily, there's no cat in the room right now. So I really give you my undivided attention. Yeah. Yeah, where's Polly? Yeah, for those who don't know, now I have a dog. But luckily she's somewhere else behaving herself. So yes. All right. So I just think it's super cool. My point of getting that bit of backstory that we started there with you being recommended and us having a chat not too much later. And that was in February of 2022 when I had no idea that I was ever going to do publishing. Whoop. Fast forward about 18 months. Here we are. We've worked together on multiple issues of the magazine, 3 in total. Actually, folks, you can kind of see the cover prints, parting proofs for New Edge Sword Sorcery. The new issues that are coming down the pipe. Dariel is in the purple one there, issue 4. So that's cool. You can look forward to that later this year. Nice 12K story of Orhan the Snow Leopard, of course. Now here we are working on this book, this beautiful thing, whatever. I don't know where I'm building with that, but I just think it's cool. I like that we've had that journey together, and it's been nice getting to know you as a person and Discord and all that stuff. But now let's help people who are watching this get to know you a little better. So let's start broad, right? Sword and sorcery. You may have heard of it. Now, to a lot of people, like that phrase is kind of synonymous with just fantasy in general, wizards and stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't want to be like the comic book shop guy from The Simpsons and be kind of like, well, actually, and get snobby. But I do think there's value in explaining what the difference is between like the fantasy subgenre of sword and sorcery and like grimdark, cozy, epic fantasy, all the other kind of flavors, Tolkien, whatever. But I'm not here to explain it. Dariel, what does sword and sorcery, in a nutshell, mean to you? How do you interpret it?
Well, my definition is pretty close to Howard Hodge's definition. It's action-adventure stories with exotic settings and a touch of horror, where the hero is often pitted against monstrous beings and sinister supernatural forces. I model my own sword and sorcery closer to Robert E. Howard's and Paul Anderson's, I'd say. So yeah, there's more sword than sorcery, but you can also go toward the other end of the spectrum, and you have Michael Moorcock and even more so Clark Ashton Smith with more sorcery than sword.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say your take definitely, it focuses a little more on the sort of the grounded physical side of the genre, which is all good, but not that you are, stingy with terrifying, weird supernatural elements. What would you say makes for, something that's not just like a ghost? What would you say makes for something that's kind of weird with a capital W? What is it that you find when you're writing a story and you're kind of like, there it is. That's what I'm going to put in here for the sorcery side of things.
Well, when I read it, I have to say that I must want to say mommy, Yes.
You got to scare
Wrong timing for a drink, Oliver.
So you want to, you got to be terrifying yourself.
But,
and you're like, okay,
I think I said this before, but when we're going for a horror touch, I want to, tap into primal fears. What made you crawl under the bed when you were a kid? And that's what I want to get into. That's the vibe I want to make you feel. So it shouldn't be too well described, because if you describe it too much, you put it on camera, light it up, it's no longer horrifying. Keep it in the shadows. Okay. And also, tap into, those old fears that will never leave the human soul, I think. Fears of death, fears of the supernatural. Okay. The fear that you call up something and you can't control it. So, yeah, even the sorcerers are afraid in my stories.
Yeah, no, I always appreciate the sorcerers characters in your tales. Like, they're kind of riding a bucking bronco, and they're on the back of a horse that, like, they're just barely managing. You don't know what's going to happen and when they're going to fall off. Yeah, no, it's really satisfying. I never get that feeling of like magic is just another technology, that the wizard is just, they're pointing their finger and something comes out of it, but it might as well be a bullet from a gun. There's always that kind of unpredictable element in your stuff. So that's sort of a brief walk around of what you feel sword and sorcery is. But how about we look at the character you're most well known for, Orhan the Snow Leopard. What if someone's never heard of him? What if someone's just come to this live stream? They're like, I don't know, this seems kind of neat, but like, who's Orhan the Snow Leopard? Who is he?
All right. I guess the easiest intro is, what if Genghis Khan had, instead of becoming the Genghis Khan, if he had been defeated and reduced to a life of becoming a wanted outlaw and fugitive? And of course, Genghis Khan would never take that lying down, right?
No.
So he's going to fight his way back, no matter how, back to where he wants to be. But hey, in this world, there are real supernatural threats in the way.
Right. And he's got the guy who deposed him who's still, moving around there, Jungar, who, like, I think it's kind of fun that in all the Orhan stories, sometimes he's more in the foreground. Sometimes he's kind of just like a name in the backstory at the beginning. We quickly forget about him because we're focusing on other things. But the man who deposed, Orhan is like a running villain. So it gives a kind of sense of connection. It gives a kind of, I guess, like shared words through your stories. But I never read any one story and feel like, oh shoot, I don't know what's going on, I should have read another one, right? Because I think it's fair to say that you feel that SNS should be kind of episodic. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. I do prefer episodic. I want every single story that I write to be an easy entry point for the reader. So it will not be a continuing series, but if you take all the stories together, you will start to figure out that there is a solid timeline behind all this, and you will see the progression.
Yeah, I really like that. And that's part of what we want to do with these novellas. Folks, if we get this book out there, then the nice thing is that it'll just be the beginning. The Dariel and Bryn's books will actually each be volume 1 in ongoing series that we would love to do, where any given novella, you can pick it up. You can pick up volume 3 to start, and you'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, I see what's going on here real quick, and enjoy that on its own. But, as Dariel's saying for the Orhan stories in general, if you pick up all the volumes, starting with this little double thing we're doing here, then you'll definitely get rewarded as you kind of piece together bits and pieces. It'll feel richer, I guess is a way of putting it, right? It's not that you're like solving a puzzle because that implies that you don't understand it. It's more like you just get a headier broth, get more nutrition in your meal. I don't know.
Yeah, the ramen gets thicker.
Yeah. So that's the premise of Orhan, but you've been writing Orhan for a little while now, and I realized I've never actually asked you, when did you first invent Orhan? Do you remember like the original inspiration? Was it, just sitting back reading a book about Genghis Khan and then you got a light bulb over your head, or was there something else? Do you remember when you came up with it?
Yeah, I first came up with the character for the story, Lord of the Brass Host. You'll find that in Heroic Fantasy Quarterly number 7, in their first best of anthology, and in my collection Swords of the Four Winds. So that was the very first Orhan story. And that all started with a photo from National Geographic, as actually quite a lot of my stories and my world building stuff does. So I'm a rather visual person, and I am, being a history nut, I love National Geographic. So I was looking at the picture of the Terracotta Army in Xi'an, and I said, it would be fun if these guys came alive, and stormed the city or something. And so I started to try to put together a story around that. And I was wondering, all right, so who's going to oppose this army? And I came up with the idea of the guy who opposes it is actually the guy who uncovered it. and that he would have to turn against the guy who commissioned the awakening of that army in the first place. And then, so thinking about it, okay, it's in Xi'an, that is in China, in northern China, near the border with Central Asia, pretty close to the border. So, okay, let's bring in a Central Asian. What hope do I have for a Central Asian? Okay, Genghis Khan. But Genghis Khan won't be a good sword and sorcery hero because he's the Genghis Khan.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to do anything by himself. So what if Genghis Khan got overthrown? Boom, that all started. That's where it started. The ball really started rolling. And then I remembered, my wife is going to conk me on the head for this. I remember this really pretty girl in Kashmir with gray eyes. It seems that gray or hazel eyes are kind of not common, but they occur pretty frequently among those hill folk. So I said, okay, to distinguish him from most other Mongols, let's give him gray eyes. So what? And that gave me the idea of, okay, this guy's got a really cold level stare, okay, a piercing, deadly stare. And hey, what animal has that? A snow leopard. And it fits because he's haunting the Himalayas.
Right. Okay. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I probably put that together a while ago.
Came up with him, after the story. I'm sorry, Oliver. Yeah.
No, go ahead. Yeah, so you got like the idea for him for that story, but you feel like the eyes did the eyes come later? It's been a while since I've read The Brass House.
Yeah, the eyes actually came later. I was already starting to write it, and then no, I wasn't starting to write it yet. I was still doing my notes. Okay. I'm a pantser, but I do notes. I do preparatory notes, quite a lot of them.
I find it funny that you call yourself a pantser because, I've seen you on the Discord and elsewhere talk about how you like to use that Obsidian software, and it sounds like you actually have a very detailed note system. But how would you say you're a pantser if you have that note system? I believe you. I'm just interested to hear how you.
Yeah, what's interesting is I don't outline the story so much. At the most, I have a very rough outline. But in terms of laying the groundwork, the foundation, I believe in really working hard on that, getting your research done, getting your premises done, double checking the premises versus the research, because, very often I'll come up with a story idea. I'll come up with a historical parallel that I want to set it in. All right. And then I double check it and whoops, that's not it. Okay. I'll give you an example. In Walls of Shira Yulun, I had one character about to end his life over a matter of honor. And I had already written him with a blade in his hand. When I read something that revealed that the ancient Chinese preferred method of honorable suicide was not seppuku. It was not cutting yourself open. It was hanging yourself. So, whoops, change.
Well, okay, so I love that, obviously, right? I mean, I work with you for a reason, but I'm curious, to people who might be thinking, well, what does the historical accuracy matter? Because this is like a secondary world, right? This is a fantasy, Mongolia and China and so on. Now, I think there's a good answer to that, but we're here to hear your thoughts. So why would you say it's important to get the research right, even though it's taking place in a secondary world?
Because it matters to me. Because everything I write is really written for me.
I think that's the perfect attitude. That's how you often get the best work, right? Writing to please yourself instead of just an imagined reader who hopefully likes this. I don't know. Geez, it shows confidence.
It has to feel solid for me.
Yeah. And you know what? As someone who obviously is not you reading your work, it's interesting because even though it's a secondary world and I'm not someone who, I've learned a lot actually through reading your manuscripts, but I mean, I don't know the history and so on as well as you or Bryn by far. And yet I get a lot out of reading what feels like, okay, even if I don't know something is a fact or something you've made up for fun for the secondary world, the fact that I know a lot of it's researched and a lot of it, even to my like layman's eye, I can kind of go, oh yeah, I heard about that. It makes the whole thing feel much more carefully assembled. And yet, as you say, you don't, you provide this kind of foundation, but then you kind of have fun charging all over it, right? Because do the pantsing part of the actual manuscript. And then that gives the manuscript all this energy. I don't feel like I'm walking through a carefully constructed house of cards, which can have its pleasures, but for sword and sorcery, you want a sense of energy. And I always get that reading your manuscripts. I
Right.
always feel like stuff is moving, things are happening, but they're happening on a really solid stage built out of things like your careful notes and your careful historical research. So yeah, it's like a kind of best of both worlds in a way, right? You're kind of not a plotter, but like something resembling a plotter plus a pantser. I kind of like it.
Somewhere there.
You're
I'd
like a
say
fusion.
I'm about 60% pantser, 40% plotter, or maybe even 70-30. But yeah, once you have the foundations down, I think the story becomes so much easier to spin out. Because
And of course,
once you have the world, yeah, once you have
yeah,
the world, things start moving by themselves. The gears start turning. You've got solid characters in there that you know what they want. The gears will turn.
well, and speaking of character, of course, yeah, knowing your characters well helps you know what they're going to do next, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we talked a little bit about Orhan already, but before we move on to other things, in more specific to this story, the Walls of Shira Yulun, I would love you to tell us a little bit of like, what are the qualities of Orhan that you find are like his core that help you know what he's going to do next, that help you think, well, what's his next adventure going to be? What would this guy get up to? How would you know Orhan? What is there to know of him as a person? Not just like
Well,
facts,
first
like being
things,
deposed.
yeah, I'd say first things first. For every sword and sorcery character, I think the most important quality is indomitability. Simply that, unwillingness to take anything lying down. So that's a very good wellspring in itself. And then more specific to Orhan, of course, is that he's got a goal. He's got a perennial foe in Jungar. And what makes it interesting for me is that this perennial foe is someone who knows him very well because he grew up with him, was actually his foster brother and his sworn brother, what the Mongols call an anda. Okay, that means you spilled some of your blood into a cup together and drank that wine or that airag, fermented mare's milk. And so that is a most sacred oath of brotherhood. And now this guy is his sworn enemy.
Yeah.
And will stop at nothing to hunt him down and have his head.
So actually, maybe there's like a little spin-off question. Given that these guys are in some ways a mirror of each other, right? Like it's established well in your stories that they're both excellent fighters, and they, when they do fight, it tends to be sort of comes to a standstill pretty quick. So then it falls back more on their cunning. They're both great generals. They both have, like one thing I really love about Orhan is the fact that he's quick and he can fight with a sword, but I get a lot of satisfaction out of his cunning, his planning, whether it's a quick trick in the moment or long-term thought. Now, I'm really trying to be careful about spoilers, but there was something super early in Walls of Shira Yulun, and to tie up some other stuff we've been talking about together. Do you remember, Dariel, when I was like, hey, man, I really like this thing you did early on with the materials at the temple? What part of history is that from? It was so specific and so clever. And I was like, oh, that must be something, some famous Chinese general pulled off or whatever. And you were like, nope, I made that up.
Oh, yeah. That actually sprang from, having an idea where I would set the city of Shira Yulun, which is okay. The Orhan stories are not set in the historical world. All right, they're set in a secondary world. But I file off serial numbers with a toothbrush. Okay, so it stays very close to real history and geography. And so where I set it was in my mind, it was somewhere near Xinjiang, and that place is actually quite arid. Not many big trees. So I was thinking, okay, so we've got a siege situation, and the usual medieval practice of siege work was to, just to harvest timber from wherever you were and build your stuff with that. Now, how are you going to do that without trees?
Yeah.
All right. So Orhan, knowing that he is going to besiege this city someday, comes up with a solution to that. So I'll let the reader find out. Yeah. And the problem is the tables are turned on him because he ends up inside the city.
Right. Well, and that's part of the fun. So, hey, why don't we get to the premise? So, we've had many great Orhan stories. You told us a little bit about the very first one. Could you please tell those listening and watching here, the Walls of Shira Yulun? We know it's a siege story. We know Orhan's caught up in the middle of it. But yeah, what is the story?
All right. This story is really intended from the beginning to be a pressure cooker, where Orhan can't do what he usually does. So that was a challenge for me as a writer. to put Orhan in a situation where he cannot do what he would usually do. He has to stay put. He has to come up with ways to fight in that he's not familiar with, all the time that he is being haunted by a supernatural foe. So that sounded like fun. I think readers will notice, those readers who have read the Orhan stories before, that these stories actually have a lot of military stuff in them, a lot of war, instead of the usual sword and sorcery adventure where it's kill this guy for me, steal this thingamajig for me. Okay, so in this one, Orhan is usually not a mercenary. He's fighting for himself, or if he is a mercenary, then he only takes commissions where he's allowed to have his own head, right? Mm. But in this one, he's fighting for himself. He's fighting to keep an old promise to an old mentor, and there are some flashback scenes in there that will show you how Orhan came to be Orhan. Because he's a wanderer, he's a traveler, he speaks multiple languages. How'd that happen? If this guy was staying in the steppes the whole time during his whole life, how come he knows so much?
Yeah. And you stick him with having to basically defend the city of his enemies. Aside from his arch enemy, there's the sort of the fantasy Chinese that he's concerned with, and he's like, "Oh, I was going to siege the city," and then, as you say, you turn things around on him, so he has to spend the book defending it, which I love. And yeah, again, come back to your research multiple times while reading the manuscript. I was delighted at Orhan being like, "Oh, they're doing talking about the people besieging the city." You would look out from the walls and go, "Oh, they're doing what I would be doing, but I'm stuck here." I'm on the receiving end of everything I would be doing. And yeah, it is definitely like you're no stranger to writing battle scenes, which is one of the many reasons I thought, it'd be great to have you. And obviously this is one kind of big battle in essence, right? A siege. What do you think? Let's zoom back out a bit for a second. What do you think makes for writing a really good battle scene? Because I think lots of authors who do fantasy and historical and other things love the idea of writing a war, a battle, whatever. But they can kind of get messy. They can kind of get caught up in all the details and logistics. The sort of the camera that they're guiding gets lost. There's a lot of pitfalls. So I guess what I'm saying is, what do you think makes for a great battle scene? And what would you advise any writers who would love to do a better battle scene to avoid?
Okay. I think I'd say my teacher in writing battle scenes was J.R.R. Tolkien. If you read his Battle of the Pelennor, that is one well-orchestrated battle. You get to see what each side is planning, what each side is doing. You get to see the surprise that was pulled off. So what Aragorn did with the Corsair fleet, that's an Orhan Timur level move. Yeah. Switching things around. All right. Well, yeah. Sorry, you were saying?
No, you go ahead.
All right. So yeah, I was saying J.R.R. Tolkien writes a really good battle scene. So I think any fantasy writer who'd like to do one would benefit a lot by dissecting the Battle of Helm's Deep and the Battle of the Pelennor. Aside from that, I grew up on a diet of World War II books, both fiction and nonfiction. My father collected a lot of those. He had actually a little war experience himself. He was a guerrilla during the Japanese occupation.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Although, I don't think he really got a fight. His job was really stealing supplies.
That's still pretty cool. That's kind of scary.
Yeah, because he was like 15 or 16 at the time.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that'll do it.
So, yeah, you just go steal supplies. Okay. Anyway, so there's that. Read a lot of that. Read a lot of historical accounts that have good battle scenes. Robin Lane Fox Alexander is a very good source. And I just found out yesterday that this guy was the consultant for the Alexander movie.
Oh, okay.
And instead of asking for a big fat paycheck, he asked to be allowed to lead the charge at the Battle of Gaugamela. Or was it Issus? Okay, so there's this writer on a horse. He's an old prof. He's on a horse and leading the charge and having the time of his life. And that's his pay for being the consultant.
That's pretty cool. That's a story you get to tell for the rest of your life and remember living. So, all right, Dariel, I'll see what I can do to get to set you up for that. It's a little harder with books, but I bet we can. We'll get you on a horse.
Okay. I have a real talent for horseback. I know how to fall from a horse.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, okay. Now I'm gonna have to try and make this happen. But in the meanwhile, I'm curious. One thing I find that can get messy in battles is point of view. And one thing
Mm,
that I've seen you execute well over and over again is the fact, especially when you have just the one, main character. Because I mean, Helm's Deep and all that, you have all these kinds of like protagonists and antagonists. But with Orhan, so often you'll kind of keep things rooted on him and then zoom out to the battle at large. Like, how do you? I feel like there's kind of a dance, kind of a rhythm that you establish to
mm.
make sure that you're not staying anywhere too long, you're not boring the reader or confusing the reader. But yeah, how do you figure out the rhythm of switching point of view or moving around the battle to make it exciting and not like a confusing, tangled mess?
For that, once again, I'd refer the writer to Tolkien and also to cinema. Um, Watch movies with good battle scenes. You
Do you
know,
feel just absorb the stuff and you'll get the rhythm in your bones, kind of thing?
yeah, I think so. Internalize it. It's not something that you can put down in a recipe. I can't
Okay.
tell you, okay, you should spend so many words doing this, so many words doing that, so many minutes doing this, so many minutes doing that.
Yeah.
You can't. But once you get into that organic bouncing around, you know what's needed. You shouldn't stay too long. If you stay too long with any one character or scene, then it makes the thing that happening feel longer than it really is, right? So you want to stay short. You want to hop around a lot. And oh yeah, one more thing. Try playing Mountain Blade Warband because that is a story. I mean, that is a game that makes you your character's actually on the field, unlike Total War,
Yeah.
okay, where you're maneuvering large armies around, but you're not on the field. In Mountain Blade Warband, you are on the field, and if you spend too much time, you know, controlling your forces, you are going to get lanced.
Oh my god.
So there's
Yeah.
that.
Well, there you go. I mean, you're taking inspiration from all over, including video games. I love it, man. Um,
Yeah.
okay, so
Everything's
to be
Christopher the Mill in my book. Yeah.
so to a more specific battle scene, of course, this is a siege. So,
Mhm.
what great sieges from history, fiction, or both were on your mind while you were writing Walls of Shira Yulun? I think you and I talked a little bit about Tim Willick's book, The Religion, when
Mhm.
you were early in working on your manuscript. But yeah, what else was on your mind? Was there any particular battle that you researched, or
Yeah. I actually bought two reference books for this no, for this novel, for this novella. I got the Siege Weapons of the Far East, volumes 1 and 2. Actually, I only needed volume 1, but it was just too good. I ended up buying volume 2 after. So there's that because the siege weaponry that was used in China was a bit different from what was used in the West. They had some devices that may not have been used until, or rather, after the Romans. So very well developed siegecraft there.
like different kinds
Had
of
to research that.
catapults, or like what weapons are we
Yeah.
talking about?
Okay. They had catapults. They had. I can't be sure whether it's called a mangonel or a trebuchet. One term I've seen was traction trebuchet. This is a beam arm that swings and throws a projectile from one end. But unlike the European counterweight trebuchet, this one was operated manually with ropes. You got a team
Oh,
of
okay.
men pulling ropes on the other end. And the counterweight trebuchet was actually introduced to China by the Mongols using Persian and Arab siege engineers who had probably gotten the machine from the Byzantines. So
Okay.
it's really interesting to trace the movement of technology back and forth along the Silk Road.
I love it. But wasn't there some
Yeah.
wilder stuff? Like I feel like I saw, folks, Daryl put together for me like a Pinterest board of images and stuff because we wanted to give that to the cover artist, who we'll talk about that in a minute. But
Mhm.
to draw inspiration from, and it didn't wind up on the cover, but yeah, fire oxen. Am I remembering correctly? There's
Yes,
something.
yes, that's historical.
Can you tell people
I
what that
believe
is?
that's
Because that
from
was
the
pretty
siege
cool.
of Xianyang, uh, where the commander put gunpowder loads on oxen and drove them into a city gate to blow it up.
Man, oh man.
So
Well,
yeah, no matter how much fantasy you put in, history is gonna be stranger. You know.
so okay, so I know I thought this was the very first novella length Orhan story about it. It turns out I was incorrect. There was a one on the short end, around 17,000 words. But nonetheless, this is the longest, greatest, Orhan in dimensions, Orhan story ever at 35,000 words, proper chunky novella. What would you say were the challenges and the pleasures of getting to work with Orhan with this much canvas?
Yeah, one challenge was filling it really. Since I've never written something this long before, not at least not for Orhan. And so it was coming up with a large enough cast of characters that he could interact with, that there would be a reason to reach that length. So, and also complexifying his situation to the point where, he would never run short of things that he'd have to do.
Yeah, he does not. I remember when you and I were talking about this very early on last July, and both of us agreed. We were like, okay, Orhan's got to be having problems on problems on problems, like every second.
Right.
They need to be like new ones coming in faster than he can deal with old ones and so on. And again, like I read the story, you delivered, man. Like, so, I'm excited to hear how other people feel when they get into that. But, because it was problems on problems on problems, I guess maybe this is where your notes in Obsidian came in handy, or am I wrong? Like, how did you keep yourself from getting tangled up as you were throwing more Orhan than you'd ever thrown at him before?
Well, yes, definitely. Obsidian was very useful for that. I'd recommend it to any writer. And also, one of my guiding lights was every scene must end with the character wanting to say, "Oh shit." All right. And I say that in all seriousness.
Yeah.
When things just keep falling through, then oops, got to change plans again.
Yeah, no, I always think of that because that's how I came into writing, screenwriting term of an act out. That even though they still do it in streaming, even though streaming doesn't have ads most of the time, but it comes from like network TV days where you'd have like something happen and then you want to have like, an oh shit moment. And then we go to the commercials so we make sure people come back or hang around,
right.
Through the commercial. And there's no commercials in this book, folks. Don't worry. But one of the many reasons I'm delighted to work with you, Dariel, is that you are excellent at the oh shit moment, at the act out moment. It's genuinely very hard for me to put down your manuscripts, even though like I might be like, okay, I got 30 minutes, kind of thing. Yeah, because there's always a moment of like, what the hell's going to happen next? Oh, geez. And so yeah, that's definitely I think very much one of your many strengths. And you and I haven't really talked we've talked a lot about writing, I guess, like conversationally as we have over, emails, Discord, whatever. But the last time we had like a real sit down like this was, a couple of years ago, 2.5 years ago. So I'm wondering, you are a prolific author. You are constantly honing your craft. You're getting new stories out there. You're doing the right thing. How would you say you feel you've improved your writing, or how your writing has changed in general, maybe, since you and I spoke right at the beginning of 2022? Is there any kind of eureka moments, aha moments while you've been writing in that period where you've gone, oh, yeah, wait, now I know how to do that, or, oh, that's moving a little smoother? Anything like that come to mind?
Well, yeah, writing this novella actually taught me to be more organized, pantser that I am. So I think I came out of it a little more planner, a little less pantser.
Okay, I'm bringing you over to my side. I'm a big planner.
Yeah. That. Yeah, and taking on the challenge of complexifying the character, trying things that I'd never done before. Like back when I started writing in the 2010s, I would never have thought of pulling off, if I may refer to an earlier work, that father-son tragedy that I set up in something about Malacaria. Okay, The Lions of Malacaria. Yes. Gosh.
yes. Your epistolary story.
Yeah, that one.
I like that one.
Yeah, I remember reading the poem Sorab and Rustum. It's an episode from Ferdowsi's Shahnameh, where the hero Rustam ends up fighting, all unknowing, his own son. And so I wanted to have a tragedy happen like that in a sword and sorcery story, and I set it up. And I was wondering all the time, can I set it? Can I pull this off? Can I make it the high tragedy that it should be? And, well, I think I did. So that was stretching my wings there. And if you have read Raquel, Natweb's, Natweb's, right?
Yeah. Natweb's short-lived magazine, but it was a good one.
Yeah. So that story was fun because in there. It's a sword and sorcery story with the monkey narrator, and this was one naughty monkey.
Yeah, I think you've
So
got more comedy chops with that character.
I wanted to see if I could write funny.
Yeah. Well, I'd say it is.
I mean, Orhan's like this grim, grim slayer of a character. Can I write a funny character? Yes. If it's a monkey, yes.
Well, okay, so maybe that can bring us to one more thing I want to talk about before we get into question and answer, which, by the way, folks, don't forget, we're going to do Q&A, so if you have any questions boiling behind your eyeballs, keep those in mind. So, Dariel, one thing that we're doing for this crowdfund is you very kindly offered to look at up to 3 people's short stories if they, pledge for that. They also get the book, of course. And so I'm wondering, like, when you look at other people's work, or even if you just look at your own manuscript that you haven't looked at in, like, long enough that it feels kind of new to you again, what are some of the things you check for? What are the things you're kind of like mindful of? Any kind of like recurring words or any kind of recurring, like, what do you have on your mind when you're doing an editing like critique or
yeah, I'm not the meticulous proofreader that my wife is. So I tend to miss words. I tend to miss articles easily. But what I do look for are signs of lazy writing in terms of research, in terms of pacing. If I read my work, I reread my work and find that a scene lags, I'm going to retool it. Okay, there's that. I'm very sensitive to clumsy phrasing, and I want to rework that. It's for me. I have to say, your prose has to sing. Like, how do you determine when an ending is good? I have to hear the theme music play after reading that last word. Okay, I mean, it's all in my head, but I've got to hear that music. And if the notes are off, then I know something's off. And it's hard to say exactly what that is in concrete terms, but you'll know it when you see it. I'm very much an instinctive guy.
Yeah. Well, and you built those instincts on solid foundations. I mean, we've talked about your influences before tonight, but before we go into the Q&A, why don't we say some of them? Because they, of course, feed into how you review manuscripts, your own and others. I mean, Conan, Robert E. Howard, obviously, but you and I have talked about how you've gone one step earlier than him to the man that Robert E. Howard said was his primary influence, Howard Lamb. And his own, fellow on the steps there, although coming from the other side of the continent, Khalid the Cossack. What would you say is something you've taken from reading Howard Lamb's Khalid the Cossack works that maybe you found useful in your own work with Orhan?
Not so much Khalid, but more on his deep dive into Babur.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Babur the Tiger, where he translated, or rather rewrote from a translation, the Babur Nama, the autobiography of Babur himself. And you get a real insight into the personality of this guy. And, he is, if Marco Polo had been a general, that's what Babur would have been.
Oh,
because, okay, this is a guy who carried the legacy of the Timurid dynasty with him. He was the last surviving Timurid ruler and the only one whose dynasty carried through after the 1500s. But in his heart, he was a traveler. So that's an interesting thing. And for all his, for all his deeds, Orhan is actually more like that. Leave him alone, and he will just be hunting. He'll just be traveling. He'll just be wandering the steppe fringes. But no, he's got a mission.
But you're right. I don't think about it as much because it's easier to glom onto his cunning and his being, a warrior and all that stuff. But, one other aspect of your work that to me is one of the less discussed aspects of sword and sorcery that I really enjoy, and others do too, of course, kind of re-wondering the world, by which I mean, when you see the world through Orhan's eyes, when he's not staring straight at his arch enemy, let's say, you do get a better appreciation of nature and all the wonders that the world can give us. And of course, I think part of what feeds into that is your being a professional photographer, right? I mean, it doesn't just help you with your literal imagery, but just like the idea of looking at the world as this beautiful thing and really looking at the form and the color and all that stuff. I think that's really beautiful. All right. Well, okay. We've been talking for a little bit here. So why don't we open up to everyone in the chat, folks? If you have any questions or maybe comments you just want to throw out there, now is the time. And if you feel that Dariel has answered everything you could possibly want to know, then that's okay too. But but yeah, any questions, folks? Anything about Dariel's writing? Anything about the novella we could chat with you guys about? The cover by Artyom, I still really am a big fan of that. A lot of people seem to really digging the more abstract
I love that.
Yeah, Orhan is not actually the size of a kaiju. I just spoiler for the novella. He does not actually rip up out of the tower. Yeah, no, that was really fun. I'm really glad that we came around that design. You know, it was kind of ambitious because I had these sort of notions of like this, that, and other thing, and I kind of threw them all at Artyom, and he did the brilliant artist thing, and then took it all together and made it something far better than I could ever imagine. But yeah, I do see that we have here, James S. is saying that he really appreciates the episodic nature of Sword and Sorcery. Even if the characters or story arcs cross over different books or whatever, for him it's just handy because he's not there for the volume 2 of a 9-volume trilogy kind of thing. And like I hear that. I found when I was a teenager I could read 39 book trilogies or whatever. But as you get a little older, you got a little too much to do. It's it's satisfying to sit down and just get like a whole story in a short story or a couple of sittings in a novella, and just get you. I find you get the same kind of hit, but a little quicker and easier. I'm also very pleased to see another comment here from Rhett is awesome. Oh, we got another here. Sorry from Henry Lopez says, sorry if I'm late to the party and this has already been asked, but can we get a thumbnail of the protagonist in the plot of Dariel's story? Okay. Well, yeah, fair enough. All right. So we have kind of covered this a little bit, but for Henry's sake, why not? Dariel, if you had to, in like a few sentences, I challenged you to when we were coming up with the campaign, how would you describe Orhan and his adventure?
Well, think of Orhan as a alternate world Genghis Khan who has been deposed and reduced to a wandering fugitive, who in Walls of Shira Yulun must defend a city of his old enemies in order to fulfill an old promise, all the time that he is being hunted by a dark shaman using spirits. Yeah, specifically the spirits of those he has slain, which makes it even worse.
Yeah, we get some of that right in the opening, which, oh boy. Actually, hey, we got a question from Lee himself here, social coordinator. Is the end of Orhan's story arc already known to you, or is it still a mystery?
The general,
like Orhan across all those many stories,
yes, the general is known to me. The specifics are not. But if I may introduce a spoiler, well, Orhan is going to have a son named Orlok, who is also going to have adventures of his own.
Oh boy! All right, I knew that, but I have yet to see. We have to see Orlok charging around. I look forward to it. We have a question from James.
That's an interesting question.
Yeah, as someone who is by nature and training a historian, when do you know it's okay to fuck around with history and stop researching and say, "Well, this is where I deviate"? That's a good point. Yeah, where do you choose to say?
That's a very interesting question. Okay, because I'm not quite sure I know the answer for myself, but I guess on a case-to-case basis, if I feel off after reading my work, I would say, okay, that's not a good deviation. Okay, but maybe more to be more specific, I think if it deviates too far from the known parts of history, then either you would have to make the reason for the deviation very clear, or not use that deviation.
So even if you'd have to deviate to keep the story moving, because I always think about it like you really want Orhan to eat that slice of cake. Oh my god, I want to see that scene where he eats that slice of cake, but shit, they didn't have cake, or shit, whatever. I'm making a very silly example, but you get my point, right? Like if something you really want to do with the character, but history says no, they couldn't do that. Would that be a point where you go, well, I'll let him do it, or does that tell you that the character's got to do something different?
My answer would be to work my way backwards and to find the point where I can deviate so that I can set up that situation, if I can.
Okay. All right. Okay. And if you can't, you've got kind of a code of honor here that you're like, all right, nope, not happening. Can't eat the cake.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, let's put it this way. If you're writing Sword and Sorcery, beware of putting Michelle Yeoh in your story, Okay. Yeah, Oliver knows this.
Yeah, no,
I got to imagining one character as played by Michelle Yeoh. I sometimes do that when I'm writing, so that if I have an actor or an actress in mind doing those actions and saying those lines, it becomes easier for me to internalize what comes next. And one character, Fayen, I imagined her as played by Michelle Yeoh, and there's this part where Orhan is asking her to help him plot an escape from the city, and she says, "Hell no, I'm staying. I'm fighting." And whoops, no, she changed the plot.
Well,
So whoops, okay, we'll go with what she wants.
Well, there you go. Yeah, fantasy casting. It's funny. I must have done it a couple of times in my life, but I never see celebrity characters in my work, and I'm envious of people who do that. I think that's so fun. I don't know why my brain's just broken on that, but I'd love to have Michelle Yeoh tell me what's going on. Okay, so again, the sort of stuff we covered earlier, but Henry's probably not the only person who came in near the end of our talk here. Henry's asking, is the story set on our Earth or another world? If it's on our world, what time period is it set, more or less? So we've established it's a secondary world, but you know the history better than I do. I can say the times of Genghis Khan, but I'd have to go look up what even century that is, just because I'm a big dummy. So roughly when would you say this takes place?
We are looking at the 12th, early 13th century Central Asia, China border.
Okay.
In fact, if you want to be very, very specific, I looked very much at pictures of oh boy, okay, old man me. What's the name of that province that starts with an X?
Oh,
Xinjiang.
Yeah.
Xinjiang, yes.
I've read it. I can't. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So around there.
So I did a lot of references to that. I watched the YouTube videos on it, the travelogues. So yeah, a lot of my research is visual.
And actually, looping back into what we were talking about with history and decisions on when to deviate and not, okay, so it's that period. If you are wanting to do something that involves an element that happened very close to, but not within it, how much rubber band do we have here? If it's like, oh, well, Genghis Khan was dead, so no, or Genghis Khan was not yet born, so no, or is it a bit more like, okay, within this century, like what's
it's broader because Orhan and Jungar are fictional characters, so they are not Genghis and Jamuka.
No, but
so I had that freedom.
Yeah, okay. So you give yourself a bit more wiggle room in terms of the years.
Yeah.
All right. Okay,
what I don't give myself wiggle room for is anachronisms in the time period.
Yes.
There.
Okay.
So yes, gunpowder shows up in the story, but guns do not.
An important distinction. Plus, I think I've talked about this before with sword and sorcery. If you want to get into definitions, often we talk about things like outsider characters and motivations. How horror is treated, how sorcery is treated. But sometimes you get into real nitty gritty, and so you often get people on Discord and other places being like, "So can you have guns?" And I mean, I personally, there's like a big asterisk because there's always exceptions across all the fiction and all the creativity. But I do find myself I'm a big fan of gunpowder showing up. I think it's a hoot, But I think once you get to people actually firing flintlocks at each other, you've kind of gone into it changes the way people do battle in ways that I think make it. I don't know, read a little different to me.
I agree, 100%.
Outside of SNS. Not bad, just different. I think you feel the same way, right?
100%, yes. Yeah. Although, okay, now that you have started my mind on this, you know that I'm a big fan of El Borak, right? 19th, early 20th century character, former Western gunfighter who drifts into Afghanistan. And I can very easily imagine an El Borak story that edges into sword and sorcery territory.
Well, there you go. Right?
Even though this guy has a 6-gun.
Yeah, I mean, there's always exceptions, of course. I mean, as I was speaking in my head, I was imagining, the occasional time that you get weird little sci-fi elements cropping up in sword and sorcery. You get a little blur, not even Sword and Planet, but just something like Kane or whatever, where you have a UFO pop up. You can mix things up. But I mean, there's those are outliers. We're talking main SNS. I tend to prefer not to have guns show because it just changes the way people relate to each other. But yeah, okay. All right. So I mean, I feel like we've got everyone's questions, unless there's a comment I'm missing. I saw someone saying that Red is awesome. There says no game makes me want to write more than Mountain Blade Warband. So there we go. There we go.
Oh yes, Kyrgyz rule.
I got
Kyrgyz, by the way, are the Central Asian faction in Mountain Blade Warband.
Oh, okay. I gotta pick that damn thing up. As preparation for today, I re-listened to our interview from a couple of years ago, and you mentioned Mountain Blade then, and I said at the time, "Oh yeah, it's like for sale on Steam. I'll get it." But
that's an old game, and I still play it.
Oliver, okay,
But
well,
2010, I think. Came out 2010.
My promise is, Dariel, before we next do any kind of interview, I hereby vow on this live stream, I will at least play one game of Mount and Blade Warband because it sounds so fun. All right. Well, I think we've covered all the main events here. So, folks, if you're watching this later, hearing this later in some other format, I was going to loop back to the top real quick. We've got the Double-Edged Sword Sorcery crowdfund for Dariel's novella paired with Bryn's novella. You'll get to know Bryn a little better in our next live stream. We haven't scheduled it yet, but we'll have updates on social media and on the campaign. We've got until October 19th, noon, 12 p.m. EST, to get this thing funded. It's a little ambitious because we're trying to do something really cool. We're going to do this thing traditionally printed. You're going to have a classic mass market paperback for the paperback. And for the hardcover, we're doing a limited run of hardcovers that are the same size as the paperback, which I kind of like. I couldn't tell you the edition to save my life, Dariel, but years ago I was at a bookstore and they had a run of, I think they were Hardy Boys. And I picked one in my hand and I was like, this is a hardcover, but small. What the hell? And I just felt it in my hand. It was so satisfying. And those hardcovers are going to have bookmark ribbons, of course, to help you keep your spot. I really hope we can go past our minimum funding goal because we're going to make those books even sexier. The very first goal is spray color edges. Don't know what that means? It's when you look at a classic paperback or new ones, people have been bringing that back. Where you have like a painted color on the edge of the pages. Sometimes it's gold, sometimes it's purple, sometimes it's like a hot yellow kind of thing. Anyway, it could be any color at all. I'm leaning towards purple. I think I'd like to do purple because on each cover we have elements of red on yours and blue on Bryn's, and so mix them together we get purple. But maybe we'll do a poll of our backers and they'll get to choose from a few options if we get to that stretch goal. And the only other one I'll mention is the one after that will be, when you have a double, you have that middle, right, in between the two novellas. And you don't want to accidentally get to the end of one novella and then go, whoops, and even, maybe you read upside down pretty well and read the ending of the other one. So I've been thinking hard about what we want to put in the middle there. And there'll be something no matter what. But I was thinking, wouldn't it be so great to have a full color 2-page art insert right in the middle, just lovely glossy, pull open art.
Oh yes.
I would love to get to that. That's our second stretch goal. The art by Sejan Rai. You can see examples of his work on our crowdfund or Google him and check him out, of course. He does wonderful stylized stuff that I think would be really suitable to what I'd love to see, Dariel. We'll figure it out. I'll talk with the artist when we get there, right? Is like a 2-pager of, Orhan on one side and maybe like Goatskin, Bryn's character on the other side. Kind of gazing across, fantasy and historical, because Goatskin, her stories are in ostensibly the real world with fantastical elements. So it's like your characters would be staring across like the same sort of fantasy Gobi desert, but like into each other's universes and each other. I don't know, something like that. I got ideas that I think will be really fun. So I hope we could do that. And then the last stretch goal, we're doing 3, keeping it simple. Is a little something for all our backers. It would be an international shipping discount, because we know shipping can be harsh. So we would take $5 US off Canadian shipping, $10 US off everybody else's shipping. And even, if we don't get there, the nice thing about the crowdfund is, if you want to get the book, this is the best possible time to get the book, because it has all these exclusives. You can see like our 2-sided bookmark. Everybody who gets a physical format copy gets a 2-sided bookmark with the elements of the cover on the side. But also to shipping, you only pay if the crowdfund succeeds. So pledge now. Don't worry about it. If it fails, you won't get charged. But if it succeeds, you get a book. You can't lose. But the shipping won't be paid until months later. We do things through BackerKit, and one thing I like about them is we don't have to charge you shipping until about a few weeks before we actually ship the book to you. And it takes a minute to make the book. We got to actually physically print the thing. And when you do traditional printing, that takes a minute because it gets you higher quality. So yeah, you could pledge for the thing October 19th, you get charged. You wouldn't pay for shipping until December, January, February, whatever it winds up being, right? So yeah, it's really the best time to get the book. It's the most affordable and you get the most bang for your buck thanks to all the exclusives. And you help us make the thing, which we're super grateful for. So yeah, Thank you, everybody, for checking out our crowdfund. It's on BackerKit. Just search Double-Edged Sword Sorcery, or go to the link in the chat if you're with us right now. And I promise we're the only Double-Edged Sword Sorcery on BackerKit. And I hope you'll be with us for this campaign, which we always try to make them kind of a fun little party. We're going to have 3 more live streams. And check out the community tab. You can chat with other people about like what would you pair in a double, all that kind of stuff. We want to make it kind of a fun event. And we're really happy for you joining us at this very big opening that we have here with Dariel. So, Dariel, is there anything else you want to say to folks before we bid them good night?
Well, yeah. I'd just like to remind people that if we can get to 200, I believe it's 250 backers,
yes,
there will be a bonus story, which I am working on right now. I am already past the midpoint, and you can bet that Orhan is already saying, "Oh shit."
Yes, that's true, folks. There's going to be a bonus story by Dariel if we hit 250 backers. If we hit 300, there'll be poetry by Bryn. All of it ties into their respective stories and worlds. Again, like only people who back the crowdfund will get these things. Only for them. So we hope you'll join the crowd and get these things unlocked. All right. Again, thank you, everybody, so much for joining us. Thank you, Dariel, for getting up and chatting with me at 7 a.m. your time. Oh, the time zones. Oh, the time zones. I really appreciate it. And thank you to Polly the dog for thank you to Polly the dog for not throwing up beside my feet, but in fact being well behaved. And I don't know if this is a dogs versus cat thing, but here we are. All right.
Yeah, like how many sedatives did you feed the dog?
Oh, none. She's well behaved. She's a good girl.
All right.
All right. See you around the crowdfund, folks. Good night.
All right. Thank you. Good night, everyone.